Baby, you make me wish I had 3 hands.
Well, I think you're doing just fine with 2.
Excuse me, baby. We'll pick this up later.
Hello, and welcome to the third ever episode of Trash Talk. Every frame a dumpster fire? ? Is it? I don't know. About to find out. I am TK, aka Trash, the creator of this podcast and everything else trash, and I'm joined today by my co-host Eric.
Hello there.
And today we'll be talking about the original Total Recall. I say the original because I've already forgot when it came out.
1990, Paul Verhoeven directed with this. A guy who also directed RoboCop, Showgirls, and Basic Instinct, and a few other movies as well, but he's mostly known for those.
The RoboCop, that one makes sense.
This movie has a lot in common with RoboCop.
Has it very late 80s, 90s, like...
Ultra-violent. Sort of anti-authoritarianism.
Like a type of practical gore that is actually gross, not like modern movie super fake blood everywhere gross.
This is back when big budget studio movies could get away with just crazy head explosions and bizarre like physical dismemberment.
Hey Arnie, for this scene, put on a rubber face mask of yourself that's actually a balloon, and we'll slowly inflate
pop the eyes. Yeah, it's great.
Like, oh. Yeah.
I miss head explosions in cinema, I've got to say. Like, we're so far away from the Scanners era of head explosions. I'm disappointed by that. I wish it was the 80s when it came to head explosions.
I don't, but that's fine.
Hollywood needs to grow a pair and give us some head explosions. That's what Dune was missing. Head explosions.
Yeah,
I think it would have been a perfect movie. It had some head explosions.
Can we get a worm head explosion?
Ooh.
A 400 meter worm head explosion?
That would be quite something.
Ugh.
But, so we have Total Recall. I'll lead by saying, this is one of my favorite science fiction movies of the 90s. One of my favorite, I just think this movie is very, very watchable.
Sure.
I love how fast-paced it is. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger in the role. I think this is just a fun movie, and it has some interesting sci-fi depths. But this movie, sort of fun fact, was written by Dan O'Bannon, John Povell, and Robert Skilsett, who also wrote Alien and Aliens. And Dan O'Bannon started his career by working with John Carpenter on one of his movies. They went to film school together. So there's some pedigree to the writers here, and the movie itself is based on an old Philip K. Dick story, which borrows similar ideas for the premise, just these ideas of memory implantation and personal identity, that sort of stuff. So, what is Total Recall about?
So we've got a dude. He works construction.
He's an ordinary, everyday schlub who is also Mr. Universe.
Yes. Very buff. Played by Arnie. Got an amazing wife.
Sharon Stone in an earlier role.
And for some reason, at this point in the movie, a fascination with the shithole Mars.
We're in a sci-fi world. We're in planet Earth at about year 2080, around there, and it's kind of, and mankind has sort of begun colonizing the known solar system a bit. Mm-hmm. There are space tours. Elon Musk sort of really got going, and instead of just offering moon tours, he's now rocketing people around Saturn. Truly a dystopia, and there's an authoritarian element. Mars is this colonial hellhole that's just mined for its resources. Earth is we get glimpses of it being kind of authoritarian. There's the checkpoints in the subway that scan you for guns, but that's not, it's far more apparent on Mars. And Arnie is living this life. He's married to Sharon Stone, gorgeous woman, and he's totally dissatisfied with his life and has some bizarre fixation with Mars. And one of the services offered in this universe is you can go to these... He floats the idea by Sharon Stone that he wants to take a holiday. Sharon Stone is incredibly against the idea of going to Mars because she rightly recognizes it as an absolute hellhole. But there's a service in
Indeed.
this universe that allows memory implantation. You can basically go to a place, customize a vacation of your choosing, and they implant the memories. It's almost as if you were there yourself, but of course you weren't. But
What a
if you have memories of it, why does it even matter? It feels real.
what a interesting way to instantly take a stab at, like, almost like, thinking about it now, almost like a 1984 level of metaphysics. Is a vacation if you only remember going but you never went?
Yeah, you're not experiencing it yourself, but you do remember
You've
it.
never actually been there, but as far as your brain knows, you
It feels
have,
real.
and it feels real. Your brain is being told it happened. So does that then garner you? I guess it would. In
It's as
theory,
real as anything else in your mind.
it would garner you with the same mental health benefits as an actual vacation. But that feels a little. It still feels a little dystopian to me. Like,
Absolutely it does. And this film is, I think, very clever in the way it gets into it, and I think that's a large part to do with the source material and who wrote these movies. Their familiarity with sci-fi and science fiction concepts, clearly, quite literate. But that's explored in this movie as the sort of theme of personal identity. If your memories are completely different, you of course would be a completely different person. Your thoughts, your experiences, your motivations would be completely different.
I'm not gonna stick to going by the timeline of the movie on this one as much as we did with, say, Stargate, but that is the one thing that I really liked about this movie. For a movie that I will admit is not high on my list, it's not great in my opinion, but the idea that in the end the government business people who are running Mars came up with this idea to take a man who is like a secret agent of them, completely replace his memory such that he thinks that he was a secret agent of them that betrayed them, who then got his memory replaced into never remembering being a secret agent, so that he would then attempt to continue the betrayal and lead them to the leader of the rebels that they're trying to fight. But the result of that double level of memory alterations is that he becomes the person that they were trying to make him be with the memory alterations, and ends up actually betraying them and defeating them and saving Mars, essentially.
And yeah, Schwarzenegger's character here is Douglas Quaid. He has a sort of split identity, a dual identity that we learned later on, is that he wasn't always Douglas Quaid. Douglas Quaid doesn't actually exist in the context of this movie.
Was a fabrication of the quote-unquote bad guys as a tool to try and
achieve ultimate victory,
yes,
using him as Douglas Quaid, the new identity, as a pawn, and revert his identity later on. There's like two people who share this head. Getting back to the sort of premise a bit, is that Douglas Quaid, Schwarzenegger's character, goes to get this vacation memory implanted in his head at this recall facility, and during that process, things go wrong. He is what's called a schizoid embolism, some sort of weird adverse response to the treatment, and his purpose, this is actually one of the through lines of this movie, is he might be dreaming the entire thing. So what he gets implanted in his mind is this very tailored experience. He sets himself up as a secret agent, this spy who goes to Mars, defeats the bad guys, gets the woman of his dreams, all of that. And everything that happens in the movie eerily mirrors exactly what he planned out in the first place. From the personality of the woman he meets, Melina,
and the physical features of the woman he meets,
and the physical features, personality, the secret agent, subterfuge, plot. So it stands to reason that everything he experiences might just be an implant. And the way the movie ends, with the sort of fade to white, might just be him emerging from the dream. That's a possible interpretation of what the hell's going on. It's not, completely confirmed or denied, which is nice, having that bit of ambiguity. But yeah, I mean, the movie continues itself from the recall point, that Schwarzenegger has or Douglas Quaid has a adverse reaction to the recall machine. Apparently, his memory has already been sort of recoded, and they learn this. The experts at the recall center, find out that this is why he's having an adverse response, is that his brain has already been tinkered with and it can't withstand the stress of these new memories, and that sort of triggers everything going forward. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Douglas Quaid gets hunted by the people who put him there in the first place. They attempt to kill him, but his former identity, as we
takes over,
sort of has already accounted for this contingency, has sort of left steps in place for him to get his ass to Mars and figure out what's going on.
His fake former identity. His fabrication. And as you go through, assuming that it is all true and it's not a dream. Well, either way, the premise is that his fake former identity has set him up to travel to Mars and make contact with the prostitute who is make contact with the resistance sort of through her, and that's is all engineered by the main villain, the big bad Cohagen. Yes. And through that, he is intended to lead Cohagen and his goons to the leader of the rebels and to destroy them.
Yeah, as far as Douglas Quaid knows, is that his former identity had a change of heart. As far as he knows and how it's presented to him, is that his alternate identity worked for Cohagen, but had a change of heart once he sort of learned the truth of the sort of exploitation and evil perpetrated by Cohagen on Mars, taking advantage of the people on Mars. Cohagen is sort of this industrialist, this capitalist who controls the airflow, who controls like the means of production, all this sorts of stuff on Mars,
and is part of the capitalist dystopian setup here is that it is implied fairly directly, but implied that he has been building inexpensive, low quality sort of hydroponic domes that the peoples live in, that isn't, because Mars doesn't have as much of as, at least in this universe, I don't know how scientifically accurate this is, but it has less of a atmosphere. They haven't generated an atmosphere. They haven't terraformed Mars. They're just
everyone lives in these domes.
And he's been building these lower quality domes for the quote unquote lesser people, the original sort of colonist Martians and their families to live in, that don't properly filter out spatial radiation, and that is causing them to have mutations, and that's what causes the mutants.
A lot of physical abnormalities, weird growths,
including somehow a third breast.
In one of the most iconic scenes of the film, yes, the three-breasted woman. Why not?
I think that might, and the listeners will know by now because it will open. But I was tempted for this movie to make the opening sound effect. Gee, baby, you make me wish I had a third hand.
Good choice.
Like,
this movie has a lot of good like non sequitur lines like that, and some good Arnie lines too. But yeah, he gets his ass to Mars. Not after, everything in his life was a plant. He realizes his wife doesn't actually love him. She's actually in cahoots with the big bad guys, or not in cahoots, but like married or girlfriend of the main bad guy's sort of right hand, Michael Ironside, who plays Richter. And Michael Ironside is the big bad, the heavy in like all these movies from the 80s and 90s. He's like everywhere in action movies from that era.
He does a good job of it.
He's great. He's a lot of fun. I don't buy him being able to physically match Arnold Schwarzenegger, but
I do buy the sort of undertone that his wife would honestly rather pretend to be Arnie's wife for as long as needed than go back to being his wife.
Why would you go to this, this man, this chrome dome when you have Arnold Schwarzenegger?
And, like,
well, I'm being presumptuous, actually.
Not just, not to just say like, oh, Arnie's an attractive buff man. Like, she can like what she likes.
Oh, exactly.
No attack on the actual actor, but his character is a jackass.
Exactly.
His character is portrayed as a jerk.
That's what I was thinking, but I guess she's more attracted to that than she is Douglas Quaid, and Quaid is sort of meant to be this sort of shy, more meek, sort of milquetoast kind of guy.
But they do sort of suggest that she would actually, or at least that he fears his own, much as many mean people have, his own insecurities.
Sure.
That he may prefer to be with Arnie, because Arnie's humongous.
Yes.
Humongous among us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this movie is filled with like a lot of violence and a lot of weird practical effects stuff. When he gets to Mars, he's disguised as a massive woman, and he has this like elaborate headpiece,
Robo-head.
this giant robo head that starts to malfunction, and he like puts his hands in his mouth trying to get the robo head to stop talking, and it's this crazy like glitched out sequence. And the robot head like disassembles itself and goes above his head, and then it reveals Schwarzenegger underneath, and it's just this bizarre sequence, and it blows up
and
depressurizes the Mars checkpoint TSA.
I don't know how I feel about the hand wave from. They almost catch him. He does the nose thing to get the tracker out, and then the rat takes it, and and then hand wave spy shit. Now he's on Mars now he's doing a Mrs. Doubtfire on Mars. Like,
it's a very Mrs. Doubtfire kind of disguise. Oh, I love it. He has like the fake passports and all the money that his alter ego left him.
And I'm assuming his alter ego also left him the robo face, because I don't think
that's one of the things he was left.
That was implied.
We don't get a lot of details how he got everything cobbled together or assembled.
Yeah.
You just sort of have to accept it, and I'm fine with that. After that he gets sort of involved with the Resistance, the woman of his dreams, as we learn in the Recall Center. Melina, as played by Rachel Ticotin, which is a great sequence. We get to see him go through the sort of downtrodden areas of Mars. We see the exploitation, and how rough these people have it. They live with like constant fear and violence. They have to pay for air in the first place, which
the price of air has just gone up.
The price of air has gone up, which reminds me of a lot of Spaceballs, where they're running out of air on planet Spaceball. And the main villain, Cohagen, sort of reminds me of like President Scroob.
There's something that I've seen. I think maybe it was a cartoon, but where you had to pay for air, and it was literally like the characters had helmets on with quarter slot coin operating on the front of their face.
That's amazing.
I'm running out. You got change? Anybody got a quarter?
That's what Cohagen feels like. He would do that. Like, he is a cartoon villain. Like, he's a Looney Tunes kind of villain. Not exactly the most grounded or realistic, but that's part of the fun of this movie, is that it often feels like a cartoon. The violence and the effects are like so over the top and ridiculous at times, but it also has like an unusually intriguing science fiction premise and some very, very interesting themes about like reality and memory and colonialism going on.
It's an interesting premise that or plot piece that they implanted into Arnie's brain as part of the fake personality that ended up fake betraying them, that ends up causing him to actually betray them. That there's this secret thing that has been discovered in the mines of Mars, which is the whole point of Mars, is that they're mining this mineral or whatever that's super important. And
they discovered something in one of these mountains. It's rumored to be some sort of alien structure, but Cohagen, who is, the chief in charge on this planet, closed it down.
And
allows no access to it.
Point that they embedded that nugget of truth into the whole fake persona.
Yeah.
That there's this thing that has the ability to destroy Cohagen's power over Mars and completely change things that the rebels desperately want to get to, and that he won't. And then it's true, and there is this device, and it does destroy him and change everything.
Yeah, oddly convenient how that all wraps up.
I choose to hand wave it away that they put that nugget in there to make the fake story more believable, so it was a higher likelihood of the mission succeeding.
Sure.
And not just that it's pure stupid luck or pure stupidity. Maybe they just put it in there just because they said fuck it, because much like many villains in many movies, their downfall here was their hubris.
Yeah.
I think that such a ridiculous plan they thought could actually work.
There's a lot of paranoia and second guessing in this movie. It leads us to one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, is when Quaid is visited in his hotel room by by a man who is ostensibly a doctor from the recall clinic, and basically says, "Hey, you're still in a dream. Like, you're still in your memories. You're still in recall, and you can't wake up. I need you to take this pill. I need you to trust me and come with me."
And then it's his wife, and his wife is there.
And then he brings, his fake wife, Sharon Stone.
I will tell you, on the idea of, is it all a dream or isn't it all a dream? I was firmly entrenched in it's all a dream camp.
Yeah.
Until he kills the doctor and his wife instantly goes like that,
yeah.
From what should be the reaction of, oh my god, you killed the Dr. Quaid, what are you doing, honey, please, to, what the fuck, I'm gonna kill you now.
Yes.
And that broke it for him. Then I'm like, nope.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and some of the best acting in this movie, I think, is from Sharon Stone, who immediately goes from calm and easygoing and very level-headed straight into psychopathic murder rage mode. And she just flips a switch, and it is quite horrifying.
It very well acted, but it's that flip that made me decide, okay, if this is actually all a dream, she wouldn't flip to that. I was expecting him to kill the doctor and her, so that it left it more open to interpretation as to whether it was a dream or not. Because if she dies before switching back to it's not a dream, I'm trying to kill you, you don't know, because you've gotten both sides.
Yeah.
You've gotten you're in a dream, but before that you got the maybe dream version of her trying to kill him in their apartment.
It's a wonderful mind-bending scene, and the tell that gives it away for the doctor, Quaid very cleverly asks the question of the doctor is, well, why don't I just kill you now? And the doctor goes, it doesn't matter to me, I'm just a sort of implant trying to guide you back to reality. If you kill me, it does nothing to me, but to you won't be able to ever emerge from this sort of dream again. And what gives it away is the doctor sweats. A bead of sweat.
I missed that. But...
rolls down his cheek.
Oh, then Quaid goes, oh.
And Quaid figures it out. And then a whole bunch of men burst through the walls of the hotel room and try to subdue Arnie. It's great.
FBI open up.
Yep. No, they just burst through the wall,
Mars,
Kool-Aid Man their way through.
FBI? MBI?
MBI? Men in...
No. MIB? Wait, no. That's
no,
we'll get there.
no. MBI,
maybe
that's another
we'll
movie.
There.
But yeah, that leads to a lot of unusual. This movie was criticized a lot at the time it came out for excessive violence, and Paul Verhoeven is no stranger to that. RoboCop is quite gratuitous. There's one scene where a guy is melting in toxic waste, and then gets hit by a car and explodes in blood chunks. It's this slurry. It's great. And this movie has a lot of bullet wounds, a lot of bizarre maiming. It's quite gratuitous, but also quite wonderful. It's relatively tame compared to today, but
everything in that movie was fine.
Yeah.
To me, except the thing that bothered me was the Mars eye effect.
It's a horrifying sequence, and at the end of the movie, it goes on for far too long. I think it really is stretched to absurd.
And we try not to question the physics of how fast this alien device can generate
enough oxygen to build an atmosphere,
an entire atmosphere around Mars, to build enough atmospheric pressure that their faces stop exploding, and that their faces can recover from being so exploded.
Wouldn't explode in a 0G or near 0G environment like that. The human skin is strong enough to withstand that sort of thing.
They're basing it off of the science that Mars has it's lower gravity, which is fair, but it's not about the gravity. It's about the fact that because there's less gravity, there's less gas trapped around in its gravity field. There's less air, there's less pressure. Similar idea to if you take your helmet off in space. Not so much your face will explode. In fact, I don't think that's true.
Explode, no.
You freeze, but to a certain degree, the fluids in your body, like your blood and other, the first thing that'll happen is they will try to boil, because they have more than enough energy to boil when there's no pressure on them keeping them a liquid. But very quickly, a small amount of that will boil, and you'll radiate a lot of heat through infrared, and then you will freeze because space is really cold.
Yeah.
Mars is the same. That there's no air. There is an atmosphere, but it's a lot thinner. There's a lot less of it. So yes, you would have that effect of the fluids in you would try to boil, but also it's extremely cold sometimes. It's not always. It is cold. Your body would freeze or get to whatever temperature brings it to equilibrium and whatever pressure that you would probably not boil. And even if all of the fluids boil, you wouldn't. I don't think you would explode in that manner. But it's an 80s, and that's a pretty common misconception or assumption that people have had for a long time. And I think it comes from movies like this, and partly these movies take it from the fact that that's what people think would happen.
Yeah.
So that's what they got to show people.
Well, there's actually a scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey where one of the astronauts has to get ejected into a zero-G environment, and that scene has sort of been praised for the scientific accuracy, for the most part, of the sequence. The guy takes a deep breath, which is apparently something you don't want to do, but yeah, you can hold your breath in a like zero-G environment and not be, like compressed or have eyeballs explodey with like limited exposure.
I would think that you would want to, right beforehand, much like people who are doing free diving or setting records for time underwater holding your breath, you sort of hyperventilate right beforehand. But with space, you would want to exhale as hard as you can first, because all the air in your lungs is going to try and expand really rapidly when you no longer have any pressure around it keeping it in. Now, most of it will escape through your mouth and nose probably, because that's the easiest path, but it would be better if that just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. But you would want to try and build up as much air as you can, as much oxygen as you can in the cells in your lungs and in your bloodstream first. But yeah.
There's, related to the science of it in Total Recall, Mars has like 40% of the gravity on Earth, something like that, yet everyone behaves like Earth gravity.
It's not that, and they don't talk about artificial gravity.
They don't talk about artificial gravity. It's entirely possible, but
they don't talk about artificial gravity.
And even when they get ejected onto the surface of Mars, everything's
just normal.
Everything is
Earth
gravity.
They don't talk about that, and they don't talk about how space travel works in this universe. how you actually get from Earth to Mars.
Yeah.
Or they reference going to Venus, I think.
Around Saturn. That's like the common
One
vacation.
Of the moons of Saturn.
Yeah. You can take a trip around Saturn.
That's obviously they've got some near. Well, I don't want to get too scientific with it because that's not the point of this movie. But they've either got faster than light travel or near light speed travel. But near light speed travel has a lot of relativistic things that causes problems.
He does get to Mars remarkably quick.
Well, and like the idea of let's just take a vacation to one of the moons of Saturn. Well, that trip would take you what? Like I don't even know. 6 months, a year.
Depends how fast you travel,
right? But if you travel fast enough to bring it down to a short enough span that, let's say you take
you don't lose your job for being away for like
3 week vacation, and a week of it is spent there. A week of it is spent there, and a week is spent on a ship there and a ship back. Mm-hmm. Even to do that in a week, again, you're traveling so fast that like I'm not a physicist, but I imagine there's some sort of relativistic problems and like weird time shit happens when you approach the speed of light.
So, there are probably some weird rules in this universe behind the scenes, but it makes no effort to explain them, and that's completely fine. That's not what this movie's about.
Especially now. This movie has a very different feel now that everybody knows the movie.
Yeah.
Like everybody knows it well enough that like Um, yeah, you're like, I don't care. Bring on the space prostitutes or
Yeah.
whatever.
That's one of the things that
bring on-
I love about this movie and about the sort of era that this movie came from, is that there are really no pretensions. Like they're not trying to subvert your expectations, tell an entirely new story. It's all like rigidly structured, pretty formulaic, and it does it very well. Like we have interesting characters, interesting premise, bizarre visuals, and a pretty memorable premise. Um, and it's just like an of its time 80s 90s sort of action movie with enough of a spark of intelligence to be an interesting science fiction movie. And I think it's really carried along by that. Like this is in the age before um where you knew what you were getting with like big budget Hollywood movies.
There was a lot of surprise box offices with that.
Yeah.
A lot of like, because there was also a lot of,
you were just getting entertainment. You weren't getting overt political messages or bizarre story structures.
People would go see a movie that may not be. People would go see people who are not sci-fi nerds and maybe aren't.
They saw this because of Arnie.
They saw it because of Arnie.
Huge box office.
I imagine Sharon Stone had an amount of pull as well.
Paul Verhoeven was kind of on fire at this point, coming fresh off of RoboCop.
They go, here's why you should see this movie, and people go, oh, okay. Not what's it about or what genre is it? Oh, okay. And
you're getting action. You're getting a pulse pounding adventure. And then there's also enough
these famous actors.
Actors. There's also enough intelligence to actually be discussed.
And then a lot
later
of people
down the line.
People go see it just based off of that, not knowing what to expect, and are often pleasantly surprised. And then start talking about them.
Yeah. Here's some themes of capitalist exploitation and anti-authoritarianism, something that is explored in like RoboCop and especially in Starship Troopers, which was like a brilliant ahead of its time satire. I think people only really started to understand and get Starship Troopers after 9/11. That movie like really took off like 10 or so years after it actually came out, because people didn't get that it was like a satire on fascism, and that in that universe everyone is just so indoctrinated by propaganda. All the main characters just become inhuman monsters, like just jaded horrific human beings by the end of it. They become soldiers, which is what the authoritarian fascist Earth government wants from them. And they're all totally expendable. And that, that's a theme that's there in RoboCop and in Total Recall, but not quite as in your face or as much as a satire as it is in Starship Troopers. But it's there in Total Recall, especially with Cohagen, whose name is actually from the Afrikaans language. And there's a parallel there between him exploiting the people of Mars, keeping them in poverty, keeping them like sort of wage slaves to him, and then the African mining, for instance. And there's an overlap. There's a connection there. It's good stuff, and it's basically a story of how they use technology to break that oppression, to break those shackles of slavery, alien technology in this case. And that's quite interesting. I like that. That's a little more depth, a little more. Not that it's I think not that it's like a particular deep movie. I'm not trying to make that claim, but there's a little more going on below the surface than an average blockbuster.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I felt that a lot of the themes it tried to talk about were pretty deep.
And it's also goofy and schlocky at the same time.
And
then there's a prostitute with 3 breasts.
Like
there's
the thing. I think the thing that throws me off about the movie is that juxtaposition. Of I'm not sure how I feel about the like social commentary and the themes contrasted with the jovial comedy and the weird 80s
and the bizarre one-liners
action and
where
the
where
bizarre
where
one-liners.
Arnold kills his fake wife and then goes, consider this a divorce.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck? What the hell am I watching?
And then, like, not even, you get that, and then immediately after you get that, was that your wife? Yeah, she's a bitch. It's like, great.
What does he say to Michael Ironside when his arms get ripped off as they're going up the elevator?
Don't remember. I know the scene, but I don't.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I forget too, but yeah, it has the standard like 80s, 90s Arnold quips that you see in all of the movies. Like he has the same delivery for all of them.
Mhm.
Let off some steam, Bennett. Like it's filled with that, and it's great. Like this, yeah. There's so much schlock and there's so much fun to this movie, but there's also a lot of things that sort of stick with you. A lot of interesting stuff. Because it really does have a truly horrifying sequence where he's brought into like the recall chamber later in the film, and his identity is about to be overwritten.
Mhm.
Him and Melina are about to have their like identities overwritten. Arnold is going to become his old identity, one that he hates as his new one. He thinks he's just an asshole. He wants to be Quaid because that's who he is now. And Lena's identity is going to be overwritten as well, and that's horrifying. That's like really good psychological horror.
It's literal. It's not literal. It's figurative murder.
That's a good question.
Because it's murder.
Yes.
Because you're literally destroying a person.
Yeah.
But you're not killing them.
You're keeping their corporeal body, but it's a different mind in there. Yeah.
Completely erasing
their identity.
entire self.
Yeah.
I think I like talking
This
about
is why
this.
I love science fiction, because you can actually explore these things that are like
is-
impossible in reality.
I can't remember who it was who I said that at some point recently, but like, or not recently, but I heard that someone say that they explained that one of the number one jobs of science fiction is to in a unbiased sort of neutral world explore real world issues or real world concepts. So like the simple example is Star Trek the original series sort of blatantly disregarding the idea, all of the themes from the time of, you know, the much more obvious than now, because I'm not going to say it's gone, but the much more blatant than now systemic sexism and systemic racism. And Star Trek goes and says, well, this isn't a real world, so people probably won't be that mad. Let's put a black woman on the
because this is a
bridge
sort
of
of
our
post-racial society. It doesn't even think of these things.
Let's put this black woman as a very important character on the bridge of our ship.
Mhm.
And then they go into, there's the original series episode again where they so simply distill racism down.
Is that the Space Abraham Lincoln one?
No. I'm thinking of, there's an original series episode, I believe it's original series, they distill racism down to a neutral concept of they find a planet where there's people that the left half of their body is pure, like they've been painted black, and the right side is they've been painted white, and they're at war with the people who the left side is white and the right side is black.
Yeah, pure absurdity.
And they deal with the concept of these people hate each other because the colors are different.
And it looks totally bizarre to all outsiders.
A normal person with their preconceived notions about racism, and whether they recognize systemic racism at the time or they don't, or they're actively pushing against or actively pushing for it, a lot more people will enjoy the episode and take away some of the concepts that they're trying to portray without letting their internal bias color their
Because you're dealing with aliens. Yeah.
yeah.
You're dealing with something so separated from reality. Yeah.
And that's what Total Recall is sort of doing, and also sci-fi is sort of doing, is commentary on, in this case, a less politically charged and a less emotionally charged thing in a way for some people. But I think that nowadays it's actually, there's a lot of things about Total Recall that really don't work today, because it's a movie of its time, and with any movies of that era,
there's some unintentional sexism and racism in there, I think.
For sure, right? The character who is the cab driver who ends up actually being an agent,
I think Benny,
really feels like a caricature of some really not okay things.
Is his constant talk of his 5 kids, a sort of
to feed
oversexed, lack of responsibility kind of thing. That character is.
You could make a small argument, because it turns out he doesn't have any kids.
He's also a traitor.
He's also a traitor. But you can make the
argument. There's no moral grounding.
You can make the argument that I don't think this is true, but I could see someone making the argument that the movie was making a commentary on the fact that the perception of what that character should be is a guy with 5 kids, and therefore he's leaning into that as his fake persona as a double agent or whatever, right?
Maybe.
I don't think that's what they were doing. I think that's just...
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past Paul Verhoeven, but it doesn't... I don't think the movie fully sort of tips its hand toward that interpretation.
I think that in some ways there are some interesting concepts when you deal with the idea of self and the idea of, is the person the physical, or is the person the
mind? Yeah,
the mind has come back around to be very relevant today, now that we are as a society slowly, and far too slowly and far too ineffectually, in my opinion, but just very slightly starting to understand the concept and be more accepting, at least I am trying to be, not enough of society is, of there being 2 people in one body.
Mm-hmm.
When someone has a headmate, those are both...
Be careful, it's my head too.
Trying to...
As they say in the movie.
But like the idea that those are 2 minds in one body.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 people. So then and by that, accepting that means that then, yes, erasing that person's mind is erasing that person, and therefore it is murder. To circle back to where we started on that,
mm-hmm.
that's where I fall on that. It is murder, because...
Interesting. So the first identity underwent some sort of self-killing with the hope of some sort of resurrection.
It almost feels like, I don't know what the actual term for it is, but the same thing as when you, for example, though generally I think when this happens, you are not in a state to make the decision yourself. It is your proctor, your next of kin, whatever the correct term is. But when you agree, or someone agrees on your behalf, for you to be put in a medical coma for health reasons, same idea, that he agreed to not exist for a while to achieve this end goal.
Ooh,
the end goal isn't
a fun analogy.
The end goal isn't trying to save his life. The end goal is trying to defeat the rebels, but he is agreeing to essentially not exist for a while.
And agreeing to kill Quaid at the end of it, the other identity. Ooh, very interesting. Yeah, this is one of the things that, sci-fi as a genre, as a sort of mode of storytelling does so well and so interestingly. You can explore explore in depth these sort of, premises that can't really be explored in reality. You can do that with a lot of stories, but science fiction does, for the most part, attempt to have that grounding. It does try and take you out of your own personal circumstances, out of the moment, and put it in a more abstract sort of light.
And it allows to explore these ideas within universe more practically.
The
idea of exploring, is the mind a person? It's more practical when you literally have memory wipe machines.
Yes, exactly. It makes these ideas concrete. It's really cool in that regard. Yeah, it truly is quite an imaginative field. It invites you to use a lot of imagination and empathy and what ifs.
I
It
think
invites speculation
I like talking about Total Recall
more than
I
watching
like
the movie.
Total Recall.
Oh, dude, that's
'Cause, like,
totally fine. That's actually pretty cool.
because yeah, there's a lot of concepts, but the actual movie
The actual
is a
movie has some
little-
ridiculous, weird crap going on,
and yeah,
and I love that it has both. Like so many of those images, like the Schwarzenegger in the woman
that
in the get up.
that was one of my that one actually made me laugh. That I enjoyed.
I think it's meant to. I think it's
It's meant to be
there,
a little
there,
silly.
there is a comedic element here. There is a sense where it doesn't take itself too seriously, and a lot of that's like Paul Verhoeven's influence because the screenwriters I think intended it to be a lot more serious.
Yeah, I think that's one of the positive qualities of that era of like action sci-fi or just action in general is not taking itself too seriously,
Yeah.
as opposed to things like it's very easy for modern movies to take themselves really seriously and end up not being very good because of it.
Yeah, or trying too hard to make a political point, even if it's a good one, that it comes across as just preachy and beating the audience over the head with a hammer. This movie, I think, is political. I think there is a strong anti-authoritarianism, maybe even anti-capitalist element in the through line of this movie, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. It sort of lets you explore and discover it yourself. But yeah, a lot of modern films they almost have to brand themselves as being political.
And also just like even ones that aren't necessarily trying to make any kind of political message or make any kind of statement. I'll use these as an example, and they are actually movies I enjoy and that a lot of people enjoy. But I think the reason that the people sometimes who don't enjoy these movies is because of this, is where the Fast and the Furious franchise has gone.
Mm.
It has always taken itself pretty seriously, in my opinion. It seems like it does. And it started out grounded in a little bit of realism. Like Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, The Fast and the Furious. Those three movies were just about a cop who ends up betraying the police after going undercover with some street racers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ridiculous. They're not jumping $3 million cars out a window on the Burj Khalifa. They're not.
That's the best stuff.
Like they're not catching cars with tanks. They're not, or catching cars with fake jets. They're not racing across the frozen ocean in the Arctic, racing away from an ex-Soviet nuclear submarine. They're, it's just some street racers, and they've just kept upping the ante, and they still take themselves seriously. They're meant to be a serious movie, but they're so ridiculous that I still enjoy them for their own thing, but I think more and more people have
they seem
been
gravitated
pushed away.
towards them because of like that
Some people are
value.
super in for the ridiculousness,
Yeah.
but I think some people also definitely are not. They look at it and go, this is basically a comedy, but it's not trying to be a comedy, and therefore I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they took themselves a little less seriously, I mean, I don't know, have you seen any of the Fast and the Furious? Specifically, have you seen Tokyo
Drift? Absolutely.
The newest Fast and the Furious brings back the main character. He looks real weird now he's old, but the main character, the one character who was, I can't remember any of their names, but the character who did who was like a weird side character who did all of the engine tuning. And what's his name that was always selling shit? You know who I mean, though, right?
I know what you mean. I can't remember the name of the character or the actor.
And the story that they tell when they bring them back is that these three characters have moved from Japan to Germany, and this kid who in the original,
we almost have all the Axis powers. Is this what the Fast and Furious is really about?
This kid who in the original movie was just a kid who could drive pretty good is apparently the takeaway they took from that for the next time they show up in the movies, most recently, is that he was a mechanical genius, and then this guy that was a small side character who knew how to run a laptop for changing ECU settings for tuning a car for drifting is also a mechanical genius, and they're now building rocket cars. And the guy who was like the entrepreneurial selling everybody iPods and stuff is now selling these rockets for them and wheeling and dealing. And that leads into like there's a super weapon that they have to stop that's based on a satellite. So these guys build the main characters a rocket powered Fiero and they fly that to space.
Nice.
Like what the fuck is going like that level of ridiculousness? Nobody or a lot of people that doesn't work because they are taking it super seriously that they're flying a freaking Fiero to space.
Oh, that's some glorious campiness.
And you're like, but like in the 80s,
but it's played like totally straight-faced.
80s, late 90s, they would have made some jokes about it, and they would have been a little bit. They talk
a little
about
more
it being
tongue
a
in
little bit
cheek.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
They need a movies like that go super serious. They need a Han Solo. They need a character in there.
Someone to
make
be a little
fun
more
of everything.
dry and to break it down, yeah.
Literally, a character there to make fun of the ridiculousness of the situations they're in.
Yeah.
And this movie doesn't specifically have that, but it has enough enough sort of humor about its own ridiculousness.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the one-liners and shit.
It's always nice when the movie doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time has that sort of undercurrent of seriousness and things that you can, pick up on and does genuinely have a point to make, even if there is something cartoonish or schlocky about it. Which is what I love about Total Recall. Whenever this movie is on TV, I pretty much watch it all the way through. Like whatever point you started at, you can just watch.
My problem with that statement is not anything except who still watches TV.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, I haven't watched. I haven't seen it on TV in like 6 years, but I'm talking about like old school,
sure.
Cable. Because this would be on all the time. The Fugitive would be on all the time. Hunt for Red October. These are movies that you can just put on and watch.
Are we gonna add that to our list? Hunt for Red October.
Or
is that one too?
We can talk about it.
That one.
We can talk about adding it. I mean,
we can talk about adding it. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, I think just to wrap up, we again, as with all movies, we have to give it our Sheen beans.
Mm-hmm. What are you thinking? You enjoy talking about it more than you do watching it, which is its own thing.
I think it's about on par with Stargate for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
About a six-ish sort of. Maybe.
For me, it's probably a bit higher. I'd put it closer to an 8. I think this is just solid entertainment all the way through. Glorious Schwarzenegger. The roles are great. It's cartoonish. It's fun. It's well paced. You barely feel the 2 hours. I mean, if you like science fiction or movies of the era, or are just interested in weird, wonderful movies, I think this is absolutely a must-watch. It's one of my favorite action science fiction movies of the 90s.
Okay, well, this part I didn't plan out super great. We're supposed to announce what movie we're doing next.
Ooh.
Here. I'm not letting you say no. We're doing Battleship.
Oh God, the 2016-ish,
the 2016-ish Hasbro made Battleship the board game into a movie.
Oh God, I know nothing about it.
Perfect.
Is it like? Okay, I guess I'll find out what it's all about when. When we watch it.
If you want to tune in to the next episode, that will be in an unknown amount of weeks, as I've said at the end of all 3 of these episodes so far, we haven't decided on the schedule yet. We'll figure that out. You'll know by now what the schedule is. If you want to, before next episode, go find yourself a copy of Battleship. I'm sure you can get it through YouTube Movies if you must. You don't need to go see it in IMAX. I don't think you could.
You don't need to sail the high seas in order to find it?
No, you do not. And we do not advocate for that.
No, of course not.
But you can find it. It's out there. It's not in theaters anymore, obviously, because it's been out quite a while.
They need to, in the grand
not
tradition of bringing
fancy.
back movies to theaters, Battleship, I think, is sort of top of that list. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, so check that out if you want to before the next episode, and we will be back talking at you in some time, I guess.